So, I'm going to be going over the 7 best decks in the game, and it's no surprise that Bomb Warrior is number 1 by far. It's like, it is way, way, way up here. I can't really go higher than that because the picture's cut off, so you can't really see how high I'm going. But just know it's the tippity top of the tier list. It only loses to weapon removal, which not a lot of classes or decks run. And the few that do run it, like Priest, aren't seeing much play because they're not very good right now and get rushed down and outvalued by a lot of things. So, its biggest counter isn't seeing that much play. It's got great big target removal, so it can deal with things like Libram Paladin and Druid. It's got a decent amount of aggression and speed to it, so slower decks like Turtle Mage are kind of have a problem, and you actually give them enough bombs to where there's a decent amount of time when they could die to the bombs, or potentially Blastmaster Boom with a Whirlwind could potentially kill them. Like, you have ways of finishing them off. And yeah, this deck has good matchups into pretty much every single deck in the game. Even hard aggro matchups, this deck can beat, especially if you get in a good early Sword board. Shield Slam, Whirlwind, and Blade Storm. In terms of mulligans, what you want to do is you want to keep Sword and Board, usually Corsair Cache, usually a Coerce and Blade Storm into most matchups is very helpful. Shield Block, and then Wrench Caliber. Wrench Caliber is only if you don't already have Corsair Cache in your hand. If you do, you can get rid of it. And then Karagath is okay, kind of on the fence about him, but if you like him and you want to put the Prime in your deck ASAP, that's understandable. Usually the sooner you put it in, the sooner you draw him, which means the sooner you can get the extra value out of the Prime. So it's reasonable. Also, if you have a weapon in hand or Corsair Cache, keeping an upgrade and or cutting class is decent as well. So that's about it. Let's jump into number 2. So number 2, darn it, why do I always voice crack when I say 2? I've taken this like 3 separate times, but not important. Point is, option 2 is Control Demon Hunter, or Soul Demon Hunter, whatever you want to call it. I think that this deck, the only reason why I have a winning matchup against Bomb Warrior, which is the best deck, is because I run Acidic Swamp Ooze and Cobalt Sticky Fingers. Now, the reason I do this is because this deck, Bomb Warrior, Face Hunter, and Weapon Rogue, all of which are decks on this tier list, by the way. All of these decks run weapons. Some of them run multiple weapons. Some of them have weapons that can buff themselves, like the Eaglehorn Bow, and you need to kill sometimes, and these come in handy quite a bit. Especially if you steal, like, the lifesteal weapon into the mirror match, and then heal, like, 4 or 6 extra health because of it, and they don't get to heal that. Essentially, instead of just being a 4 health swing because you hit them and heal, or 6 because you hero power hit them and heal, they take 3, you heal. You're also denying them heal and denying them damage. It's like, in total, a 12 HP swing. It's huge. It's massive. So I think that it's really, really nice to have these cards in the deck. And then you also have some pretty good removal with Blade Dance, especially if you can get a lot of attacks with Lapidary or the Twin Slice. And you might be wondering, you don't run Magtheridon. Why? I just don't think it's very good. To have a top-end big minion, I put in Coilfang Warlord. Mage Hunter's really good at dealing with buffed Paladin and Rogue minions like Edwin and the Explorers, and then the Argent Braggart for Paladin. And then, in order to close out the game, you just have giant or pretty solid-sized minions like the Lapidary, the Adept, Sociologist with a ton of its cards, the Coilfang Warlord, and weapons that just smack them in the face until they just die. In terms of keeps, Spirit Jailer, Twin Slice, Acidic Swamp Ooze into Warrior, or one of the matchups that I said have weapons a lot of the time, Mana Feeder Panthera, Soul Shear, and that's about it. Into aggro, the Mystic can also be good along with the Warblades. Everything else you usually dump. So yeah, let's jump into number 3. So number 3 is Face Hunter. There's no real introduction needed for this deck. Basically keeps, you just want to keep all the 1-drops you can. Literally all of them. And then other keeps you can have are the Face Stalker and sometimes Scavenger's Ingenuity. This is just a pure face deck. Normally, I don't like to have 2 decks of the same class on this tier list, but spoiler alert, Highlander Hunter is also on this tier list, and it's on here for a very similar reason. This deck is just so fast. It applies a ton of pressure. Even slower, like, control decks like Priest and Warrior struggle against this deck because it can just apply so much pressure, and there are only so many removal options in those other matchups. And then into Druid, this deck has Pressure Plate and Freezing Trap, which basically shuts down Druid hard. And then not only that, but Pack Tactics is a little bit of a mind game, because usually they'll try to kill off your Face Stalker. Pack Tactics, if you get that, will allow you to get more secrets out, and they'll be like, hitting themselves in the forehead like, why the heck did why is he running pack tactics? And now he just gets more value. So a little bit of mind games, great responses to some really good decks out there. You do kind of struggle sometimes into decks with big taunt minions like Libram Paladin, especially if they get their Libram of Hope to heal them. But most of the time you'll kill them before they get to that point anyway, because this deck is so fast. And yeah, this deck is really, really strong. I would highly recommend it. It's really simple and really cheap. If you don't have Dragonbane, you can take it out for another Unleash the Hounds or potentially a Burrowing Scorpid. This card right here for a little bit of bonus damage. It's up to you. So anyway, let's jump in to number 4. So number 4 is Weapon Rogue, mostly because I personally like Weapon Rogue more than Stealth Rogue. I think the damage is more consistent. It's not necessarily like go hard really, really early and hope to close out the game. This deck has very, very good very good options in the mid game, so you don't necessarily have to hardcore win early. You have other ways of winning the game as the game goes on with giant slaps with the weapon. If you want to play Secret Rogue, I think it's relatively close, and they're very similar in play style, so I'm not going to put both of them on this list because they're like pretty similar, except one is hard aggro into Secret Passage win. This one is decent aggro and then mid game into Secret Passage win. That's basically it. They're fairly similar. You mostly go face with both decks, so you can use either depending on what playstyle you want. I think this deck is slightly more expensive because you need the Doctor and Jandis, whereas Stealth you don't really need the legendaries. Like, you do run some, but they're not as needed, because if you go to Stealth Rogue right here, just a quick little thing, you don't need Lillian or Jandis. You could run another Cold Blood and then a Wolf Rider for some extra burst damage instead. They're just far easier to replace than the mid-range that Weapon Rogue needs. But overall, I think this deck is absolutely phenomenal. It's number 4 in my opinion. The top 2 were by far above the rest in their own tier. The next, like, 3 or 4 are pretty clumped together. Basically 3 through 5 are close enough to where it's not like a huge difference, and then 6 and 7 are kind of hit or miss decks, or like hidden OP decks that I've played a little bit but haven't really stood the test of time yet. But anyway, this deck is in that clump of like really solid decks that I would highly recommend, but not as good as either of the 2 decks that I said were number 1 or number 2. Of all of the Druid decks, I find Malygos Druid to be the best and least toxic, because it actually requires a decent amount of skill to piece together all of the cards that you need to get to that OTK or that lethal. Yes, sometimes they can high roll with Ysera. Yes, sometimes they can high roll with the Guardian Animals and get Overgrowth, and it can seem really, really lame. But like a lot of the time, first of all, this deck gives up several defensive options like Big Beasts in order to put in Omu, Alexstrasza, Malygos, and Geppetto. So usually the second Guardian Animals is a dead draw. It gives up several defensive options. It doesn't have Crystal Power anymore because, again, you have to put these things in. So it's a lot easier to rush down. That being said, this deck is a lot better at beating these slower matchups like, say, Mage, especially Turtle Mage, because they have no way of responding to your OTK and you can just kill them. And into a lot of other matchups that are fairly aggressive or at least mid-rangey, you can generate enough resources to eventually like not lose the game. And then after you don't lose the game, then you win the game with the OTK and everything's all hunky-dory and you win and you like give yourself a pat on the back. Great job, we won. So overall, I think this deck is pretty fun as far as I'm concerned. I've played every single Druid deck at least a little bit. This deck at least doesn't make me feel gross when playing it. It makes me feel like a little bit gross, a little dirty, but not like disgusting. So I'm okay with it. If you guys enjoy this gameplay, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, as well as ask any questions that you have. If I miss lethal, I do talk about most of my miss lethals, but if you find one that I don't talk about, I'd be happy to hear those as well. And then hope you guys enjoy the video. Also check out Twitch and the community post where I talk about coaching. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. Let's jump into it. So number 5 is Malygos Druid, and I personally love this deck in terms of Druids. I think it's a lot less toxic than a lot of the other Druid decks out there. It requires some brain power to put together OTKs where sometimes you won't ordinarily see them. Ysera's a good late game win condition as well if you don't necessarily get the OTKs. It's a pretty good deck, kind of coin flippy because you need the ramp in order to get the stuff fast because that's how you win. But overall, it's again a pretty solid deck, although it is a bit coin flippy. I would say that if you want to make this deck a little bit better or more defensive, take out an Ironbark and put in a Lake Thresher. Having one extra beast makes guardian animals a little more consistent, and the cleave can be very useful. But you don't want to have too many minions, because if you put in too many, that means Geppetto could miss Alexstrasza, Malygos, Omu, or Ysera a little more often, which is kind of bad. So it really comes down to what you want. I've seen some people not run Teacher's Pet and run the Lake Thresher instead. It really comes down to what you personally want in your deck. In fact, I might take out the Ironbark for the Thresher soon. I'm not sure. I'll probably do it in my next video. Actually, you know what? We're just going to do it now, just to get ready for the next video, just to see how that runs, because somebody said I should do it. But overall, yeah, what you want to do in terms of keeping for this deck is Nature Studies, Breath of Dreams, Overgrowth, Guardian Animals, and that is it. If you have a dragon with Breath of Dreams currently in your hand, you can keep that if you want, although it's a little bit risky because that means Geppetto is less likely to high roll. And you can keep Innervate and Lightning Bloom as well if you want, but I don't think they're as important in the keep as some other people do. I'm going to be honest. I think that unless you have something that you want to curve into, like a beast in your hand that you want to Lightning Bloom into, it's not the most valuable keep, and I'd rather mulligan for cards like Overgrowth or Guardian Animals to guarantee a mid-game. But anyway, let's jump into number 6 and 7. I think 6 and 7 are a little bit below, or at least less played, so these are kind of like hidden OP decks, basically. So the last deck that's kind of a bonus, but mostly here because I forgot to put it on, is Tempo Mage. Now there are two reasons, well, three kind of, reasons why this is at the bottom. One, I forgot. Two, I don't want to see more of this deck because I absolutely hate it, but it's good enough to deserve a spot on the tier list, so it's on here. And three, in one of their like Reddit posts, I think Hearthstone actually said that Sorcerer's Apprentice was potentially a target for some nerfs. And if Sorcerer's Apprentice gets nerfed the way that I think it'll be nerfed, this deck will die. It will actually die. The only reason this deck is as good as it is because you're able to play a ton of free spells. Once they take that away, if they nerf Sorcerer's Apprentice or make spells cost 1 less, but can't cost 0, if they do that, this deck will be dead. So if you want to just straight craft this deck out of nowhere, it's kind of iffy. But in terms of power level, it's very, very strong. It's extremely difficult to play, though, because a lot of your win conditions are randomly generated, and a lot of the time you have to play a lot of cards in very short turns because you generate so many resources in such a short period of time. And you have to count your mana and figure out when you can combo off on certain turns, when you can play Mountain Giant, when you can play Genvala and Sorcerer's Apprentice and get a ton of value. Overall, that is about it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you do, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. This deck should definitely be in that middle clump, by the way. Definitely not at the bottom. It should definitely be in that range of like 4, 5, and 3 to 5, rather. It's not like top tier, but it's definitely not 8th either. So keep that in mind. If you guys enjoy, please feel like, comment, and subscribe, as I just said. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope to see you in the next one. See ya.